Hi guys, Carrie Burnett on here for my third and final presentation on massage therapy and being trauma informed. And today I'm talking a little bit about self-care and why it's so important. And honestly, it's not just important, it's actually essential. I wanted to start off by, there was this Facebook post I saw a couple weeks ago addressing sort of this issue and sort of discussing how, massage therapists don't necessarily have to be perfect and on all the time, and that this expectation that we're always going in as our best self is sort of unhealthy. And I really liked that post. I thought that post was really, helpful. It was really informative. In the sense that we're looking at the fact that we're not perfect. Once again, we're checking the ego. And so I really am on board with that idea. But I did want to talk about that I think that the understanding about what self-care needs to be around all of this is a little bit misconstrued with that. Because the idea isn't necessarily that you have to be 100% perfect or spot on all the time. The idea around this is that you have to have some sort of self-care network, self-care system that you're doing for yourself in general in order to be the best massage therapist you can be, and then even beyond that when you're working with trauma to be as beneficial as you can be. And so it's not necessarily about being perfect. It's about being generally cared for and generally taking care of these. Sorry, my kids are home today and they're knocking at the door right now, but my husband is helping them out. So if you hear some crying in the background, that's all that is. While we're accepting, sorry, I get myself back where I was. While we're accepting that we don't have to be perfect, we can agree that there is this standard of care that is optimal. So we don't have to say that we have to be 100% perfect all the time to acknowledge that it's okay to strive to be in the most optimal place for the care that we're giving. So I just wanted to address that because I saw that post, and I think that that's a really valid point, that we don't have to be perfect all the time in order for our work to be beneficial. But I do think that there's a good conversation that needs to be had around the standard of us taking care of ourselves. So why do I think that that's so important, and why actually do I think it's not really an option when it comes to working with trauma? Well, you guys have probably all heard the example that's used time and time again about being on the airplane and the crashing and the oxygen mask. They tell parents to put their oxygen mask on before putting the oxygen mask on their child, which anybody that's a parent can attest that sounds counterintuitive. You want to put the oxygen mask on your child because your instinct is to save your child. But the mindset behind that is that you can best protect your child when you're taking care of your oxygen, because if you pass out from not having oxygen, you're not going to be able to help them put their air mask on anyways. So I love that because I think that that's really valid here, and that's really a good point. And with massage therapy, not only might we not be able to help people for not caring for ourselves, but it's actually possible that we can hurt people, especially with trauma. We can send people into a flood, which is where they sort of become overwhelmed with their trauma. And so we definitely don't want to do that. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not taking care of our own oxygen mask, we have a higher risk of doing that. So some of the reasons why this self-care is essential for this work is because one of the things that we're working with when we're working with trauma and with massage therapy in general, is feedback. Physical feedback, so the feedback we're getting back from touch, and then feedback, like I talked about last time, from movement of hands or changing of breath. This feedback is what's helping to guide us in the session. And so if we are not taking care of ourselves, actually even just purely physically, if we're not taking care of ourselves, that feedback can become impacted. For example, if I'm working and my body mechanics aren't great, or I just hurt myself in some other way, and my nerves in my neck are infringed, they're infringing on the brachial plexus, that nerve goes all the way down my arm, and when I'm looking for feedback with touch, it's going to use that nerve system to communicate with my brain what's going on. Well, if I don't have the full function of that nerve, then that is going to be disruptive and maybe not fully functional. So this is a really physical side of it. We can take that and parallel it completely over here to the emotional side. If I have areas of my emotional life that I have not dealt with, I'm not dealing with, I don't have a safety net of professionals helping me to work through that, then there's a possibility that I might have numbness, or just sort of like out of necessity, I may have silenced that in my heart or mind. And so then when the client is reacting and giving back that, I may not be receptive to that because I have that infringement there. So it's essential for us to be in optimal emotional health and optimal physical health in order for us to be receptive to that feedback, both physically and emotionally. And then a second part of that is just safety and stability. So when you're working with trauma, whether you have a background in trauma or not, the things that people are discussing and sharing with you can be triggering. And when we have a support network that we're working with and we're triggered like that, a couple of things happen. First of all, if we're working through that with a counselor or in our own work, when we're triggered like that, likely we've already done some work to help us have better responses to that trigger. But also, if somebody says something that's triggering to you, and you know because you're regularly doing this self-care that you have a place to go and talk through that trigger, then your response to that is going to be less urgent, because in your brain you have that safety net to rely on, and you're not relying on 100% yourself, which can feel very overwhelming to people. So this allows us to respond in a more stable and safe way. And at the end of the day, when we're working with trauma victims, that stability and that safety is so huge. And so it's just really essential that we're offering them to that. And one of the ways that we can ensure that is by having our own support network of self-care, and that we're doing our own emotional work. And then the far end of this spectrum is that if we're not caring for ourselves, not only do we run the risk of not creating a safe place or not even being able to receive the feedback that we're getting, but we also run the risk of actually hurting somebody in the process of helping them. And that's, obviously nobody's intention is to hurt somebody, but we can, particularly when we're working with trauma, we can actually injure somebody in the process. Now, some of that may be because sometimes that is what happens. The education, the research on trauma is growing every day. And, in the past, there was the idea that the best way to process through this stuff was almost like a catharsis, where you just take them back in. And we're learning now that that actually is sort of re-traumatizing. And so, there's some of it that it's learning curve. We're learning as we're going. But what we want to do, once again, is that optimal. We want to strive for that optimal level of care. And when we're caring for ourselves, then we give ourselves a better opportunity to avoid doing these things, that we could prevent, that could hurt somebody, sending them flooding or just responding in a very reactionary way. Things like that are some very, some examples of how that could manifest. So last time I mentioned a little bit too about mindfulness, and that's a huge part of this, because what we're present with in the moment is what we're going to be able to work with. So if I'm in a massage and I, it happens, it's really easy to get lost in the massage, to get even lost in the anatomy sometimes, I'm just working with hamstrings, and I'm working with the calf, and oh, I feel this knot and I'm working with that. It's really easy to get lost in that, especially because we have so much training in the anatomy, and there is a lot of that we have to be aware of. But if we're going in with this mindset of, I'm here to be trauma informed, I'm here to be safe, and with every single person, then like I said last time, we're going to be looking for feedback. We're going to be paying attention to that. And is it going to be less present if you're not aware of it? No, it's there regardless of whether you see it or not. But if you're paying attention to that and you're engaged in that and you're mindful of that, you're going to receive that more and you'll be able to respond more to that. So that mindfulness is really, really important. And once again, even the mindfulness is the ability to be mindful in that is impacted by our own level of self-care that we're doing. If I'm not doing a lot of self-care, if I don't have healthy outlets to be processing through my own emotional work, then when that stuff comes up, I'm going to go into a massage and I may be a little bit lost in that, and I may have a hard time taking myself and bringing myself into the moment and the client I'm working with. So once again, it comes back to that. It's really important to have these people in our lives, whether it's a counselor or some other sort of support group or something like that, where we know we can talk about that to better help us set boundaries with where it's appropriate to be in that mind space and where it's not. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on just slightly is this idea of energy work. There's not a ton of science around it, so it's a little bit hard to talk about tangibly. But, at my school, the Healing Arts Center, we were taught pranic self-care and Reiki self-care, which are both forms of energy work. And empirically, I can tell you that when I work with people, oftentimes when I leave the massage, there is sort of this weight that I can almost feel. And when I go and do that pranic self-care or Reiki, I can feel a release of that. And I really do attribute the fact that I'm able to do the work I do to the fact that I know these skills. Because in addition to the ability to go get my body worked on by other massage therapists and go get emotional work done with either somatic experiencing practitioners or my counselor, whatever part of my self-care team I choose to do, I also think that this energy, even though the science isn't there, I feel that energy presence and that energy effect is real, and that it's impactful when we're working with trauma. And beyond that, it doesn't really hurt anything to do it. And, from my understanding, there is a potential there of bringing our own energy in and sort of having that meld with our clients' energy. So, if I have the ability and the time to do the self-care pranic cleansing before a massage, I absolutely will do that, because anything that I can do to try to make myself more of a stable and safe environment, whether that's energetically, emotionally, or physically, for my client is always going to benefit them in this setting. And lastly, one thing that I forgot to go on to was when it goes to we're talking about self-care, we're also talking physically. We're talking purely physical here too. Like somebody that works with websites is going to have a computer. That's their tool, right? Or somebody who is a carpenter, they'll have a hammer. These are their tools. They're going to take care of those tools because that's what they need to do their job. The difference though with massage therapists, because our tool is our body, is that if the computer breaks down, you can go get another computer. If the hammer gets rusted out in the rain, you can go get another one. If our bodies break down, barring the exception of like a knee replacement or something like that, you can't really go get a new body. So, and I know that this isn't like new earth-shattering information, but I think it's important enough to be reminded of that we have to take care of our tools. We have to take care of ourselves. And, it's bigger than just that our tool can break, because like I said, those biofeedback mechanisms that we have can actually be impacted if our body is not working right. And if we are, I think a lot of times in the massage community, because because it is, we're all trying to make money, we're all trying to survive off of our business. So if somebody comes in that wants work that's maybe a little bit deeper than what my body type or my muscles ability allows, I'm tempted to try to go deeper to meet that person, because we're all trying to get our client base built. And so, but the important thing is to remember that longevity wise, it's actually better to just perform at the level at which you're comfortable. And then if that's not the right level for that client, allowing that to be okay. And maybe they'll go and find another massage therapist, but at the end of the day, not trying to kill yourself to meet this certain level of performance is going to help you longevity wise, and then too with your other clients, because if you're hurting yourself with this client, you're not going to be able to be as good of a massage therapist with this client, and so on and so on. And when it comes to trauma, if we're pushing ourselves and we're cutting off this biofeedback stuff we have, it's going to prohibit our ability to really be present in that and really be receptive to what they are going through, so we can be sensitive and respond to that. So it's really important that we're taking care of ourselves. As massage therapists, we're really lucky because we can barter with one another a massage. So find somebody in your community that you feel comfortable with, that you like, and set up something regular, because it's really important. And I know it's hard to find the time, but when we're working with trauma, when we're doing this, it does take a toll on the body, and we need to take care of ourselves emotionally, physically, energetically, spiritually, whatever elements you have in your life. You have to be really just filling the cup up so that you can go and be a stable and safe person for people to open up and be present with you during massage, particularly with trauma work. So that's all I have for today. This is my last one, and I really just appreciated the opportunity to come on and talk. I hope everybody's having a great Wednesday. Is that what day it is? I hope you're having a great Wednesday. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and comment them below. I'll be on for a little while and I'll be able to answer them. Thanks, guys.